The morning mist clung to the towering pines like ghostly fingers, reluctant to release their hold on the ancient forest. Franklin Hayes sat in his weathered rocking chair on the cabin's front porch. A wool blanket draped across his shoulders despite the July warmth. At 83, his once powerful frame had diminished to skin and bone, but his pale blue eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had made him legendary among conservationists. The cabin creaked gently beneath him as he rocked, a sound that had become as familiar as his own heartbeat. Every plank, every nail, every corner of this modest structure bore the mark of his own hands. He had built it 52 years ago when he first arrived in Yellowpine Reserve. A young man burning with passion to understand and protect the wilderness that stretched endlessly before him. "Franklin, you need to take your medication," Dr. Amanda Kelly's voice carried from inside the cabin, followed by the soft padding of her footsteps across the wooden floor. She emerged through the screen door, her medical bag in one hand and a small plastic cup of pills in the other. Franklin's weathered hands trembled slightly as he accepted the medication. "Still think I should be hooked up to machines in some sterile room in Missoula, don't you, Amanda?" Dr. Kelly had been making the 2-hour drive from town twice a week for the past month, ever since Franklin's condition had taken its final irreversible turn. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her dedication to her patients was unwavering. But Franklin Hayes represented something more than a patient to her. He was a living piece of Montana's conservation history. "You know what I think," she said, settling into the wooden chair beside him. "But I also know there's no point in arguing with the most stubborn man in 3 counties. A ghost of a smile crossed Franklin's face. "Stubborn is what kept me alive out here for 50 years. Stubborn is what saved half the grizzly population in this region." The sound of approaching footsteps on the gravel path interrupted their conversation. Marcus Sullivan emerged from the tree-line, his field notebook tucked under his arm and mud caked on his hiking boots. At 32, he possessed the lean build and sun-weathered skin of someone who spent more time outdoors than in. His dark hair was perpetually tousled, and his green eyes held the same passionate intensity that Franklin recognized from his own younger days. "Morning, Franklin." "Dr. Kelly." Marcus nodded respectfully as he climbed the porch steps. The cameras on the North Ridge picked up movement again last night. "Same location." Franklin's eyes sharpened with interest. "How close?" "Maybe 100 yards from the cabin. She's been consistent for 3 weeks now." Marcus pulled out his notebook and flipped to a page covered with detailed observations. "Always evening, always from the same direction. She sits for approximately 2 hours, then disappears back into the forest." Dr. Kelly looked between the 2 men with growing concern. "You're talking about a grizzly bear. How close to the cabin?" "Close enough," Franklin said quietly, his gaze fixed on the tree-line. "But she's not hunting. She's not foraging. She's just watching." The screen door squeaked again, and Noah Carter stepped onto the porch carrying a steaming mug of coffee. At 28, Noah was the younger of Franklin's 2 protégés, with sandy blonde hair and an easy smile that masked a brilliant scientific mind. Where Marcus was intense and focused, Noah brought a lightness that balanced their small research team. "Thought you might want this," Noah said, offering the mug to Franklin. "And before you ask, yeah, I use the good coffee, not the stuff that tastes like motor oil." Franklin accepted the coffee gratefully, inhaling the rich aroma. These simple pleasures had become more precious as his body failed him. Each sip, each breath of pine-scented air, each moment of companionship with his chosen successors, all of it carried the weight of finality. "Noah, tell Dr. Kelly what you observed yesterday evening," Franklin said. Noah perched on the porch railing, his expression growing serious. "I was checking the water levels at Bear Creek when I spotted her. She was sitting maybe 50 yards from the cabin, just like Marcus described." He paused, glancing at Franklin. "But here's the thing, I swear she looked directly at me, made eye contact, and instead of running or showing any defensive behavior, she just acknowledged me like she knew who I was." Dr. Kelly frowned. "That doesn't sound like normal grizzly behavior." "It's not," Marcus said. "In 15 years of field research, I've never documented anything like this. While grizzlies don't exhibit this kind of sustained, peaceful observation of human habitation." Franklin set down his coffee mug and leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "Show her the photographs, Marcus." Marcus hesitated. "Franklin, are you sure? She needs to understand." Marcus opened his field notebook and withdrew a collection of photographs, some recent and taken with telephoto lenses, others clearly much older and yellowed with age. He handed them to Dr. Kelly, who examined them with growing amazement. The recent photos showed a massive female grizzly bear, her chocolate-brown fur thick and healthy, sitting calmly at the edge of the forest. But it was the distinctive silver triangle-shaped patch of fur on her forehead that made Dr. Kelly's breath catch. "Look at the older photograph," Franklin instructed. Dr. Kelly compared the images. The older photo showed Franklin, decades younger, kneeling beside a small grizzly cub whose left leg was caught in a cruel steel trap. The same silver triangle marked the cub's forehead, though it was clearly the result of a fresh wound. "This is the same bear," Dr. Kelly said, her voice filled with wonder. "Daisy," Franklin said simply. "I rescued her 15 years ago. Spent 3 weeks nursing her back to health before releasing her back into the wild. Haven't seen her since, until now." The implications settled over the group like the morning mist. Dr. Kelly studied the photographs again, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was seeing. "Bears don't typically form long-term emotional attachments to humans," she said carefully. "Most humans don't spend 50 years earning their trust," Franklin replied. Marcus leaned against the porch post, his arms crossed. "We've documented her visits meticulously. Same time, same location, same behavior. It's like she's keeping vigil." "For what?" Kelly asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Franklin's pale eyes met hers. "For me." The morning sun climbed higher, burning away the mist and revealing the vast expanse of wilderness that stretched beyond the cabin. Franklin had spent half a century in this place, learning its rhythms, protecting its inhabitants, becoming as much a part of the ecosystem as the ancient pines themselves. The idea that one of those inhabitants had returned to sit vigil during its final days seemed impossible and inevitable at the same time. Dr. Kelly spent the next hour conducting her routine examination, checking Franklin's vitals and adjusting his medication. His heart was failing steadily, and they all knew that his time was measured in days rather than weeks. But there was a peace about him, an acceptance that she rarely saw in terminal patients. "I want to see her," Franklin said suddenly as Dr. Kelly packed her medical bag. "Before I go, I need to see Daisy one more time." Dr. Kelly stopped packing. "Franklin, that's not safe." "Your condition." "My condition is going to kill me whether I'm lying in that bed or sitting outside in the sunshine," Franklin interrupted gently. But seeing her might give me the peace I need to let go. Marcus and Noah exchanged glances. They had been Franklin's students for years, absorbing not just his scientific knowledge, but his deep philosophical understanding of the relationship between humans and wildlife. They understood that this wasn't simply a dying man's whim. It was something deeper, more profound. "We could set up a safe viewing area," Noah said slowly. "Use the hospital bed on the back porch. If she maintains her usual distance." "Absolutely not," Dr. Kelly said firmly. "I cannot allow a patient in your condition to be exposed to a wild grizzly bear." Franklin's voice remained calm, but carried the authority of 5 decades in the wilderness. "Amanda, I've been studying grizzly bears since before you were born. I know this animal." Dr. Kelly sighed, rubbing her temples. "I could lose my license over this. And I could lose the last chance to say goodbye to someone who mattered," Franklin replied. "Your choice." The next afternoon, the team sprang into action. With Dr. Kelly's reluctant blessing, they wheeled Franklin's hospital bed onto the back porch, tucking warm blankets around him and positioning a set of binoculars and a camera within reach. Noah set up motion sensors and a remote-operated drone camera at the edge of the forest, ensuring that they could observe Daisy without spooking her. Marcus adjusted the lighting and placed a red marker stone at the usual location where Daisy sat. It was, by all accounts, an unusual science experiment, 1 part wildlife observation, 1 part farewell ritual. By twilight, the preparations were complete. The porch was quiet, illuminated by the soft golden glow of lanterns. A thermos of tea sat on the side table, steaming gently. Franklin lay beneath a quilt his late wife had made, eyes open, alert, and waiting. And then, as the last rays of sun painted the pines in amber and fire, she appeared. From the dense treeline, the massive grizzly stepped into the clearing. She moved slowly, deliberately, her enormous paws silent against the earth. She paused at the red marker stone, sniffed the air, and sat, just as she had done each night for weeks. Franklin's breath caught in his throat. "Daisy," he whispered. Noah and Marcus remained still, observing from the cabin window, hearts pounding. Dr. Kelly stood beside Franklin, one hand gripping the railing, unable to look away. The 2 old souls regarded each other across the clearing. Time seemed to stop. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, carrying with it the scents of pine and wildflowers and earth. The bear made no move to approach, no sign of agitation or fear. She simply sat, watching. Franklin lifted the binoculars with trembling hands, his eyes filling with tears. "She's old," he murmured. "Slower, but healthy. That scar on her leg, it healed clean." Dr. Kelly said nothing. What could she say? There was nothing clinical or rational about what was unfolding before them. This was not science. This was something older than science, a bond, a memory, a recognition across species and decades. Minutes passed. Then an hour. As the stars blinked into existence overhead, Daisy slowly stood. She turned toward the forest, hesitated, and looked back once more. Then she disappeared into the darkness. Franklin exhaled. A long, slow, peaceful sound. He closed his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. That night, he slept deeper than he had in weeks. The pain in his chest faded to a dull throb. The forest, too, seemed quieter, calmer, as if it too had exhaled. Over the next 3 days, Daisy returned twice more. Each time, she sat for hours, watching silently. Each time, Franklin was ready. On the final visit, she came closer, only by a few feet, but it was enough. Franklin extended a hand, palm open, and Daisy lifted her snout, sniffing the air. They remained that way, man and bear, suspended in an invisible thread of memory and trust. After she left that night, she never returned. On the morning of the 5th day, Franklin Hayes died. He passed away in his sleep, a faint smile on his face and the photographs of Daisy in his hands. Dr. Kelly found him shortly after sunrise and wept openly. Marcus and Noah stood silently at his side, each placing a hand on his blanket-covered chest, saying their silent goodbyes. The funeral was held in a small clearing near Bear Creek, under the shadow of the tallest pine in the reserve. Rangers, biologists, students, and friends traveled from across the country to pay their respects. Stories were shared. Laughter rang out through tears. A red stone was placed at the foot of the pine, carved with his name. Franklin Hayes, 1921 to 2004. He spoke for those without voices. But the most remarkable tribute came 1 week later. Motion-triggered cameras captured footage of Daisy returning to the clearing, not to the cabin, but to the site of the memorial. She sat beside the red stone for over 2 hours, her massive head bowed as if in mourning. And then she walked slowly back into the forest. The footage went viral. Media outlets around the world picked up the story. Headlines read: Bear mourns human who saved her life. Wild grizzly keeps vigil for dying man. A farewell across species. But those who had known Franklin best, Noah, Marcus, Dr. Kelly, didn't need headlines to explain what they had witnessed. They had seen something sacred. In the months that followed, the cabin was preserved as a field research station and memorial site. A team of young ecologists moved in, continuing Franklin's work. Noah and Marcus took over as directors of the Franklin Hayes Wildlife Trust, ensuring the continued protection of the Yellow Pine Reserve. And Daisy? She was seen only once more, a year later, at the edge of a creek, leading 2 cubs across the water. The image of her with her cubs was grainy but unmistakable. She looked older, a little thinner, but there was strength in her stride, a determination in the way she guided her young. It was as if Franklin's legacy lived on, not only in laws and research but in fur and blood and the generations that would follow. Years passed. New students came to the reserve, eager and wide-eyed. They learned the story of Franklin Hayes on their first day, not from textbooks, but from the people who had been there, who had seen the impossible. They hiked to the memorial stone under the tall pine and stood in reverent silence. They studied the bears of Yellow Pine not just as animals, but as individuals, as beings with memory, emotion, intelligence. And every now and then, someone would report seeing a bear lingering near the edge of the forest at twilight. She never came close. But she was there. The legend of Franklin and Daisy became part of the forest's lore, told around campfires, whispered during long hikes, remembered in the rustling of pine needles and the hush of falling snow. But for those who were there, who witnessed the truth, it was never just a legend. It was a reminder that compassion crosses all boundaries. That bonds, once formed, do not easily break. That sometimes, even a dying man and a wild bear can teach the world what it truly means to be alive. One rainy evening, nearly a decade after Franklin's passing, a young woman named Lena arrived at the cabin. She was a new graduate student, nervous and unsure of herself. Her hair was soaked from the storm, her boots caked with mud. Noah, now silver-haired and slower in his step, greeted her at the door. "You must be Lena," he said kindly. "Welcome to Yellow Pine." Lena smiled shyly. I read about this place my whole life. My dad used to tell me the story of the bear and the old man. He said it changed the way he thought about nature. Noah's eyes twinkled. Then you're in the right place. Later that night, as thunder rolled through the valley, Lena sat in the library, flipping through Franklin's old journals. His handwriting was neat, deliberate. She read about Daisy's injury, about the early days of the reserve, about long hikes and quiet evenings and a world most people never bothered to see. And then she found something remarkable. Tucked between 2 pages was a letter. Addressed to whomever walks this path after me. With trembling fingers, Lena unfolded it. If you are reading this, then you found your way into the forest I called home. I hope the pines still whisper. I hope the bears still roam. And I hope, above all, that you've come with an open heart. You don't have to be brave. Just be kind. That's all I ever tried to be. The bear you'll hear about, Daisy, she was not a pet. Not a mascot. She was my teacher. She showed me that the wild is not a thing to be tamed, but to be honored. She showed me that trust, once given, is the most sacred gift of all. Take care of this place. And if you ever find yourself standing on the porch at dusk, and the trees seem to shift, and your heart quickens for no reason at all, just wave. You never know who might be watching. Franklin Hayes. Lena wiped a tear from her cheek. Outside, the storm eased. The wind danced through the trees. And somewhere, deep in the forest, something moved, quiet, ancient, watchful. And life, wild and unyielding, went on.